have you with us. And I got permission just now to introduce to you Mr. and Mrs. Bob Bauman. So it's a high day. We are congratulations. We're excited. I think it was 2001. Is that right? 2001. I believe AWC was meeting Rose Garden and 19th Avenue? Yeah. Rose Garden, 19th Avenue, when Living Waters first came to share, I believe? Or is that when you started?
We first came.
You just first came? Okay. First, when Daryl and Mary Jo first came. And we are so glad they're back to share with their ministry. And whatever else I say is not going to say it quite as well as they can say it. So I'm going to sit down and be quiet, and let's give a warm welcome to Daryl and
Is there any way that we can maybe get this first bank of lights down?
Yes.
That would be really great.
You need a light at all?
No, this is fine up here. We're good now.
Well, you know, it's been a long time since we've been here, and I really realized how long it's been since we first came when I saw Lynn up here, and I have to assume that the young man was the little boy that you carried in your arms when we first started coming about 2001 and seeing you. And I go, that can't be his son. And Trish goes, yeah, that is. That's Blake. So what a pleasure it is to see you on the drums, because you don't remember us, but when Mary Jo and I first saw you, you were like this big. And it seemed like it wasn't very long ago, so, but it has been a while, hasn't it?
Well, the last time we saw you, we didn't see this.
Yeah, that took about 3 years to grow that too. So, you know, God is so good.
Amen.
Yesterday evening, Mary Jo and I were driving back to our home in Arizona. We live just north of Roosevelt Lake. We live across the other side of Tonto Creek. And Tonto Creek is still flowing because there's been a lot of water up in the mountains. And as we were approaching, it takes about 3/4 of a mile to go across where the riverbed is. And we're approaching, and it looked like they had stopped people from crossing the river. It looked like there was big rocks in the river. And we're getting closer, and we're getting closer, and we're looking, and there is probably 100 birds that are right in the river, and these are birds we've never seen before. So we drive up real slow, and we get a good look at them. Mary Jo goes home, and she looks in the bird book, and these are called...
White-faced.
Is this on? Here, take this one, because I talk loud anyway.
I can turn it up.
They're called white-faced ibis. We've never seen them before.
And as she was looking at the book, as she was looking in the bird book, they're pretty, I don't know what I want to say. They don't like to be around people, so they hide. They are not seen well. And what we found is that...
We'll get these all figured out here in a minute. This was probably a once-in-a-lifetime thing for us to see. They were on their way from Mexico to the northern United States. They were migrating. They don't usually go where there's any people at, and here they were all in a line in our creek, and they were beautiful. They had this almost like a translucent green on their wings, and when they all started to get up and fly off, it was just like this wave of green that was going through. They were big birds. They were about that big, so we were just going, wow, God is so good. We saw this probably once in a lifetime for us. So thank you so much for inviting us to come back here and be able to share with you. It feels like we're coming home. It was a turning point in our life.
When we come to AWC, we're always reminded of the gratitude that we feel toward this church and the people here. You're a big part of our spiritual journey. And we feel when we come here, it brings it all back about how fortunate we were to have a church family, when we needed a church family, when we felt loved here, accepted here, and the the people and the church and the Lord kept us through AWC attached to God, connected with God, and it was a time we could have easily drifted away, but AWC was there for us. So whenever we come back, we just feel so grateful and thankful for the part that you all have played in our spiritual journey. In the time that we were coming to AWC, after a few years, you know, we lived in Pace, and we were torn toward the end of our time coming in AWC. We loved it here so much, but we felt called to maybe be in Pace and more at our church where we lived, where we could be more involved. And during that time, we were sometimes attending here and sometimes attending in Pace, and one of the times we happened to be in Pace and had not even planned on being there, we were unexpectedly invited to go to Kenya to do a series of evangelism meetings, which was so far out of our realm, but we prayed about it and God opened doors, and we were actually, even though we're the most unlikely missionaries, we actually found ourselves in Kenya in 2005.
So when we came back in 2005, we said, and before we came back, we said, God, we don't want to go back and ever be the same, so lead us into something different in our life. And he did that. He honored our prayer in Kenya. And in 2006, while we were over in Kenya the first time, we saw what the need was. As you have seen now, we're kind of recapping. We're going to spend just a couple of minutes to recap, because there may be new people here that don't know us and don't know about our ministry. So we're going to just spend a couple of minutes and go through what some of the needs were and how God impressed us in 2006 to start our ministry, which is called Living Waters. You know, we work over in Kenya on an island in Lake Victoria. It's a very small island. There's about 20,000 people on the island. When we first got there in the little village of Kaswanga, this is what their water source for their drinking water was like. Now they live, you know, right on the shores of the lake, but the lake was so polluted that if they drank the water there, they would die. So this was supposedly the next best thing. Well, this became our first initial objective, as many of you remember and have supported, was for us to go over and purify water. And we spent about 2.5 years working on a water system, getting things integrated so that there was plenty of fresh water for everybody. And then God led us. At the end of that 2.5 years, he refined us so that we would learn how to work in Kenya. We still live in the United States. We make multiple trips over. We have a business here, so it's not like we live in Kenya. We would make our trips over and do our projects over there. So we found these children that there was about 15 of them up on the hillside that were being fed, and we decided we wanted to expand that program. So we started a feeding program on the hillside, which led to a freestanding feeding center in 2008. We actually, in July, it will be 5 years since we opened the feeding center. We opened it with 65 children. Many of you will remember that you were instrumental in helping us get a solar oven, because there's no electricity there. The charcoal is unhealthy, it's very expensive. Propane is basically non-existent, so this was the answer for us to be able to cook food. And we bought out of Chicago, Illinois, the world's largest solar oven. It's called a Villager, and it will cook up to 2,700 meals a day. We also bought a couple of acres of land, and with the water that we had, we put in water storage capacity so that we could grow gardens. And we were able to grow vegetables, and we put in fruit trees. We have papayas and bananas and all kinds of things in the garden that help support the children's nutrition. These were all things that you, AWC, partnered with us to be able to bring about. This was not something Daryl and Mary Jo did. This is something that you as a church, other donors, God blessed, and he put in place. He only has used Daryl and Mary Jo as a vehicle to help this project go. You know, initially we were under the Arizona Conference so that when you gave donations, they were able to be tax deductible. Since then, we've made application, we've met the requirements, and we have become an independent 501c3 ourselves, which means we are our own nonprofit organization operating now. So we just received that letter about a month ago. It was a long, hard process to get to there, but God is good, and we are just so thankful for all of that.
Right now, excuse me, right now the Living Waters Feeding Center is feeding every day 156 children. These children are orphans. They may have one parent. Most of them have no parents at all. They live in child-headed homes. The oldest child is responsible for caring for all the rest of the children. And if they don't get at least one meal a day, they can't go to school because they can't think to study, and they wouldn't do well anyway. The children are, right now, we have gone to feeding them twice a day until recently, until a year ago, we were feeding them once a day. But, 5 days a week, but we needed to add the full week because we didn't know this when the feeding center first opened that this would happen, but after the feeding center was open for about 3 years, there was a terrible drought. And they couldn't grow their gardens. They could never get a harvest because there was not enough rain. And because of that, there was nobody that could just feed the children a meal here and a meal there, which they used to be able to get something somewhere for the rest of the day. That's no longer the case. There's just not enough food that anybody's growing, so they have nothing to share. So we saw how important it was because once when we were there the last time a year ago, we overheard the children saying, "Today is Friday, what are we going to do?" Because they knew there would not be a meal again until noon on Monday. Then we knew we just had to step out in faith and say, we have got to have a meal every day for them. So that's what's happening. And now we've even been able to give them breakfast. Some of the kids breakfast, the ones who are total orphans can get breakfast in the morning as well. So we're feeling very thankful about that. One of the things that is surprising about these children is when you talk to them, you can ask them how old they are, and they might know how old they are. Most of them don't. And the reason is because they don't know their birthday. Most of them have never had anyone tell them when they were born, and they've lost the parents who would know that. So a year ago when we were there, we thought this is really hard for us to think about them never having a birthday or knowing when their birthday is. The most they know is what grade they're in school. And that's how we gauge what their age is, but nobody knows exactly when their birthday was. So the last day that we were there last year, we had a birthday party for all the children. We said, today is your birthday. And we had a special meal, and the special to them is the normal meal that we usually have of beans and rice. And then we had actually a fruit salad. They call it pudding, but we called it fruit salad, and that was really special because some of them have never had fruit, and they've certainly never had 3 kinds of fruit at the same time like they did that day. So it was a lot of fun to do that with them. We have a staff of 7 local people that work there every day, preparing the food and working in the garden and providing security for the feeding center. One thing I just want to tell you about that was sad to us, there are sad things that happen there, and the last time we were there, we were really saddened because one of our little 3rd graders named April was hit by a motorcycle on her way to school, walking to school. The motorcycles there are called picky pickies, and they're kind of reckless, and we lost one of our little girls there. This is part of life there, and that was one sad day.
What we're going to do now is we are going to go through and tell you like Mary Jo has, and we're going to show you some pictures. We're just going to be quiet, let the music flow, and then we're going to come to a point where we stop, and we've collated our pictures into different topics and groups. So I think we're just going to run that. If you'll go ahead, Trish, and turn that on, and we'll see if we can get the volume set here right. Gives you a little picture of the feeding center and the children that attend the feeding center. The next section we're going to go into, we started on a project 3 years ago, and part of that project was to build a medical clinic and a guest house. It's very expensive for us when we go over to find a place to stay. It has cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and sometimes that much each time we're over there. So we go, you know what, we need to be putting this money into a guest house as well as a medical clinic and provide a place so when people want to go over and do a short-term mission trip, there's a place for them to be able to stay, and it's right there at our compound. So the next group of pictures that you will see is the progression and the building of the medical clinic. You'll also see in there, one of the first pictures also will be of a crew that I had of 25 people. Now I want you to think about the challenges of going not only for material challenges, but try to work with about 8 different trades with 25 different people that speak 4 different languages. And you'll see why it took 3 years to build this. You'll see one picture in there of a vehicle that is very heavy laden. Maybe through there a couple of different pictures. That is the vehicle that Living Waters bought, that we own, that is there for us to use. We rented vehicles for years and drivers, and they were always unreliable and very expensive. So a few years ago we were able to buy our own vehicle. We had it converted from a pickup truck into what you see. It's a very good solid vehicle made for the Kenya roads. So we will just proceed with this. Our crew, and I think I got to advance that one. to take you through the building of the medical clinic, and most of these guys, they were so proud at the end of their work because they had never built anything like this. This was completely out of the realm of what they were doing. Last year we did the majority of the work in 2012. It started pretty much the first of the year. I went back in November, December, finished up to the point that you saw it. My brother, who's here with me now, Rusty, he was over there for 2 months with us, working on the first of the last year, so I know he recognized a lot of those pictures. You might have seen him in those. As we move into the next section now, we're actually going to be where I was at right before Christmas. I got to spend my first Christmas time with the kids over there. We made a very special meal, and something for the children. They had multiple vegetables, they had their fruit pudding, and they had hard candy, and something that most of these kids had been sleeping on the hard dirt. No mats, no blankets. The only clothes they have been sleeping on dirt. And we were able to purchase all of the kids a high quality blanket. So you'll see it goes through quite quickly. But I want you to notice on these pictures that are coming up, the smiles on the kids' face as they receive truly their first Christmas meal and first Christmas gifts. literally skin and bones. They were very malnutritioned, and 75% of total orphans, 50% have AIDS. And today, because of the good nutrition and the antivirals that are provided to them, they're able to live a very normal life. Okay, the next little group that I want to do is where we finished up in 2013. Mary Jo and I were over in January and February, and I think the picture's just going to go through there, so I'll be quiet and let them play. The house has no electricity, so we put in solar. It's fully solar, right down to a solar refrigerator in it. Sections that we're going to go through, I want to just talk to you a little bit about for a moment. Several years ago, Living Waters partnered with Maranatha Volunteers, and we put up, you may have heard about the one-day church program that Maranatha had, and they've been doing this initiative worldwide for a few years. Well, we erected all of the churches that were put up in Kenya. In less than 18 months, with several different family members that went over and with a crew that we trained over there, we put up 111 churches across Kenya. Some of them were on islands out in Lake Victoria, all the way across the country. Some were in the slums of Nairobi. But I want to tell you, I have to tell you a story on the next two slides. This one here is where a church called Living Waters, it was a church plant, and this is where they were meeting. And after we got a church built for them, this is the church that replaced Under a Parachute. Yeah, let's see if we have that right there. There we go. These churches that we put up, there's several different churches here now. They would have about 35 to 40 in a congregation, and once the church was built, it would go to about 350. Wow. It provided a place for them to meet. This is one that was on an island, and I think this will stop here. This is the story I have to tell you. This was over on the coast. How many of you have ever been to prison? A maximum security prison? In Kenya, when you go to a maximum security prison as a prisoner, you're there basically for life. Capital offenses are armed robbery, murder, and Somali pirates. They had at this one area called Shemalatewa Prison, which means a hole from where you never return, literally. is where we were invited to put up several churches. So this is the erection of a one-day church inside the prison. I'll tell you, it was a very unusual set of circumstances that got us there. But when we had to go through 6 sets of gates with guards, with searches, just to get in. Now that may go, you kind of get used to that, that's not so bad. But when you're going in with hammers and rebar and sharp stakes and all kinds of things that are potential weapons, and you have the guards guarding you with their AK-47s in every move that you have, and you have a lot of prisoners that in many areas that you go through are available to you and to be around you. At first it was extremely